Hello, good morning. Welcome in, class. I hope you're having a great day. Today, we're going to take a look at our last component to Chapter 2, and we're going to take a look at socialism and capitalism, kind of compare and contrast each of these economic philosophies. We've taken a look at our economic systems, our traditional market mix, command. We've taken a look at the American economic system. We've taken a look at the goals of the nation, both on paper and then essentially in how things are going in reality. And today we want to wrap up with taking a look at socialism. So let's talk about what pure socialism looks like in today's world. Okay, so pure command socialism, all right, is an economic system in which there's little private property and the state owns virtually all factors of production, including the big factories. And so when I refer to the state here, I'm talking about that particular government. So the government controls these aspects of production. In a socialist economic system, the government attempts to manage production, and especially this leads to the distribution of goods. So the government steps in, and where goods are distributed and how they're distributed, that is up to them. Okay. The most recent examples that we have in our current world today would be North Korea and Cuba. Okay, each still operating under this pure socialism model. Okay. Now, what are some of the characteristics of pure socialism in today's terms? So, again, most prices are going to be set by the state, all right, rather than by the forces of supply and demand. So what does that mean? So that means the state determines how much a good costs. So instead of supply and demand, which is what we see in a capitalistic society, prices go up, prices go down. The state sets the prices in this regard. Okay. Now, the movement of resources, especially labor, is strictly controlled. All right. The central planning makes all of the decisions. So that central group of people or that one particular person, they're making the decision as to where resources are allocated. Now, most of the major factors of production are owned by the state. Okay, private property is strictly limited. If it is there, it's going to have to be approved by the state. Essentially, people in factories are limited to the small tools and the individual needs that they have for that particular job and what they're working with. Okay. Now, here's the thing: individual risk taking is very limited. Okay, so what that means is the state is going to take it upon themselves to take all the risks. And the citizens essentially pay for unsuccessful risk taking. So if the state decides to make a decision, all right, and it fails, all right, it's going to affect all of the people, all right. Instead of individual risk taking, again, this is more of a collective risk taking that is based on what the government decides to do. Spent a lot of time this past summer reading a book called The Gulag, which depicts the Soviet prison system. And one of the things with the Gulag, and one of these chapters in the book talks about just some of these massive projects are being conducted. So to build a dam or to build a bridge, and a lot of times the state essentially would take that risk, and a lot of these projects were never finished simply because of lack of resources, lack of communication, and the people ended up suffering for it. So again, in these Gulag work camps where they're working on a dam or they're working on a bridge in the middle of Siberia in some very, very, very difficult locations, geographically speaking, that falls upon the state. Those decision makings, those failures are on the state, okay, and not on the individual. Now, economic decisions about what, how, and for whom to produce are all made by the state officials through central planning and other administrative units, okay, so that is all determined by the state as well. Taxation is often used to redistribute income. Okay, so again, with this society, with a socialistic society, you don't see economic classes. You don't see the rich of the rich, the upper class, the middle class, the lower class. Okay, taxation is often used to redistribute income. Therefore, pretty much everyone is on a very equal playing field. Their levels of income are relatively comparable. All right, and no one is making too much. No one is making too little. Okay, so it is that taxation redistributes that income. But how does this all start? And where does this all come from? Well, we're going to look back in the 1800s, and we're going to go back into essentially the Industrial Revolution. Okay, so it's basically socialism, a modern economic system that grew out of the protests and the problems of the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s. Okay, so a economic philosopher by the name of Karl Marx, okay, is going to view a continual struggle between two major groups, okay? he felt that there was going to be a constant struggle between the capitalists, or the bourgeoisie, and the proletariat, who are the workers. Okay? Marx believed that the workers were being exploited. They were being taken advantage of by the capitalists, by the bourgeoisie. Okay, when capitalists made profits based on what consumers bought, all right, he felt that the workers should have that profit instead of the bosses, instead of the CEOs, all right, instead of the capitalists making the money. He felt that the workers should be paid and rewarded for their work, and that was not the case. All right, now Marx believed that capitalism would eventually collapse, all right, and the rise of communism would emerge. All right, this was an ideal society in which no government was necessary. Okay, so here's the thing. We want to make sure we clarify this because there's a lot of misconceptions. All right, let's take a look at how Marx viewed there be a change from capitalism to socialism. So according to Marx, again, four major events would occur that would shift economies from capitalism to socialism. Okay, first, he felt that capitalism would suffer recessions and depressions, and that has definitely occurred. We have seen major recessions, we've seen major depressions occur over our history. He felt that this would harm the workers and the few capitalists who would have all the industrial power. So he felt that capitalists up at the top, due to these recessions and depressions, would suffer. Okay, there's a wide gap, again, the wealth gap. All right, this wide gap between the rich and the poor would essentially cause workers to unite and overthrow capitalism. Okay, our most clear-cut example of this would be the Russian Revolution. Okay, where you have the Bolsheviks, all right, who overthrow the Romanov, the monarchy that was there and it was in place. All right, and you see the installation of the Soviet Union. Okay, the victorious workers would set up a new socialist system. So the workers overthrow, they set up a new socialist system, and workers, this is where things are different. Okay, he felt that workers would control the means of production, that they would have the final say in where goods are allocated and how goods are distributed and how goods are used within the community. Okay, the system would evolve into pure communism. All right, workers would contribute to society and in return take only what they needed. Okay, so workers are putting in and they're getting what they take out. Okay, now again, lots of personal sacrifices. That was the intent. So he views workers taking over and taking control. Here's a picture of Karl Marx. Again, a lot of people note him for his beard and his appearance, but again, this is Karl Marx. And here's the thing. All right, this was something that took root in the late 1800s, and then all of a sudden you start seeing revolutions across the board in the 20th century. Marx's original idea of workers taking over never came to fruition. This is where things shifted and things got out of hand. All right, instead, governments, and typically authoritative governments, ended up controlling the entire economy. Okay, and this is where things went awry. Okay, this is where a lot of economic systems started to kind of embody the central planning or the people that were in charge. We take a look at the Soviet Union, we take a look at the Eastern Bloc, we take a look at Cuba today, we take a look at North Korea. All of this kind of stems from this era where the workers are not in control. The governments are in control here. So that original plan by Marx kind of fell apart. Okay? Now, there are different types of socialism. Okay? There's a democratic socialism. All right? This is a system that works within a constitutional framework of a nation to elect socialists to office. All right? The government usually controls some areas of the economy, but democratic socialism is typically something that can function within a society. It is very popular and it's very mainstream in the United States right now. When you have people like Bernie Sanders, who kind of champion democratic socialism. I have a buddy of mine who is in his 30s. He lives in Ann Arbor. He's a democratic socialist, and he's very adamant about how he believes. Again, he's all for helping out his fellow worker. He has strong beliefs in that field and in that regard, but he believes that socialism, where the workers are in control, can work within a democratic society. Okay, we'll talk about the pros and cons of that in just a moment. Now, there's also authoritarian socialism. This is a system that supports revolution as a means to overthrow capitalism entirely and bring about socialist goals. All right, the entire economy is controlled by the government. This is where we see communism. This is where we see, kind of the change in what Marx originally intended. And this is where we see a lot of unfortunate authoritative states where, unfortunately, a lot of people suffer. And we see situations like the Gulag, like North Korea currently, okay, where, again, people are really quite hampered or restricted by the system that's in place. Okay, so this is a really good key here on pros and cons of democratic socialism. Okay, so again, it can work in a society, and socialism does have its benefits. Okay, so the pros, again, more equal society, reduction of poverty. All right, basically it regulates the excess of a free market, so that excess consumerism and excess materialism. You look at essentially monopolies, those big businesses like Amazon, like Apple, they would be reduced. There's a notion of universal health care, promoting the common good and social welfare rather than being selfish. So again, people are making personal sacrifices that are willing to work and cooperate with one another. There's more cohesion on a societal level. There's more, a push towards protecting the environment, okay, with this kind of mindset and mentality. The cons, though, again, higher taxes are very common, so a high tax rate. Entrepreneurs are restricted, so entrepreneurs can't necessarily create their own companies for profit, so they're going to look at places where they can find a tax haven. Okay, welfare state can create disincentives to work, so people are kind of discouraged to work, and that can be an issue. Government failure to regulate the ownership of industry. Government failure in that regard can be very problematic. Excess labor market regulation can lead to less employment and structural employment, so less and less people are employed. All right, powerful unions can create antagonism between workers and owners. So even within the framework of democratic socialism, there can be some potential problems. Okay, one thing I do want to clear up, and a lot of people will talk about places like Norway and Sweden, some of these Scandinavian nations. Understand this, they are a free market, okay, but they have some socialism components with it. So you kind of have a blend of both. You have a lot of super free market capitalism, but it also includes socialistic programs where you have free education, you have free health care. But again, the trade-off, again, very high tax rates in those Scandinavian nations. So essentially what we're getting to by the end of this unit is to understand that no economic system is perfect. Each system has its flaws. Each system has its benefits, okay? Now, we take a look at the benefits of capitalism. Again, those who place high value on personal freedom, initiative, and individuality, they're going to prefer capitalism, all right? Supporters of capitalism are going to argue that more efficiency and economic growth occur under a capitalistic society. What does that mean? That means that capital, those goods to make the goods, the technological advances, all these kind of things that you can achieve, that happens under a capitalistic system, where the argument might say, hey, in a socialistic society, a lot of things are stuck in time, and there's not room for growth in terms of technological advancements or capital advancements. So in reality, like I said, all economies are planned in one way or another. In the U.S., private firms, individuals, and elected officials are going to do the planning. Okay, in a socialistic country, all the planning is done by the state. All right. Biggest thing with capitalism, and we've seen it, all right, is the wealth gap, okay? The distinct nature of the class system. We have lack of funding towards schools, museums, medical field. Those are some major issues with capitalism. So again, you have a situation where you can become extremely rich, but also at the same time, a lot of people fall into impoverished states, and that in itself is one of the major issues with capitalism. So we take a look at recessions and depressions. You take a look at kind of this notion of greed. Capitalism has its fair share of issues as well. Okay? All right. So that is wrapping up our unit in Chapter 2 here. We're going to have a review. You're going to have a journal log on this, get some of your opinions and some of your take, and then we'll finish up with a Kahoot and our test window at the end of the week. All right, folks, take care. Have a good one.